Welcome to the Bioinformatics Lab podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Page, and I'm joined by Kevin Liebowitz, and we're both from Pathogen. So Kevin, you're down in South Africa, in Cape Town, in a vineyard here, at the very first Public Health Alliance for Genomic Epidemiology conference, PHA4GE. So tell us about that.
It's been amazing. First time on the continent for me. I'm calling from Somerset West on the Cavalli Estate. Just finished up and wrapped up. Yeah, I got a bunch to say about this conference. It was incredible coming down to Africa for this. But something we highlighted in the last episode is that you and I are both part of PHA4GE, and this is a consortium that's been running since 2019. And obviously, due to the pandemic, there was no ability for an in-person meeting. But for the first time, the PHA4GE organization got to put together an annual conference here in Cape Town. It brought in scientists from all over the world. I mean, I don't think there was a continent not represented, maybe outside of, Antarctica. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was a couple folks from there as well. So kind of speaking to the global effectiveness of this. And we got to highlight a lot of the work happening from the working groups, some of which we talked about in the last episode, then just a lot of activities that are happening through the field in general. And I can give, a perspective from really my whole time here might even be warranted, because there's been so much happening over the past week. I got here exactly 1 week ago. I started on Thursday, and the first 2 days were workshops where PHA4GE was able to get some corporate sponsorship, I believe from Roche, South Africa, for I think around 50 students across the African continent to participate in these conference workshops, which was incredible, absolutely incredible. Seeing the verve across the continent and the students and curiosity and drive was something that was certainly motivating to me. So
Kevin, what were those workshops on?
The workshops, they had a couple. The first was on data standards. So this was something that Emma Griffiths and Finn McGuire hosted. And then concordant to that was a workshop myself, Jamie Southgate and Gultikin from the Pipes and Chairs working group got to host. And, we took a really cool approach to the working group, if I can give ourselves a bit of a pat on the back, because we had about 3 hours to fill. It's like, and sometimes you have 50 students coming from all different sort of backgrounds, experience, level of, understanding of the field. It was quite interesting to see how we were going to do this. But the way we approached it is we wanted to emphasize the collaborative nature of PHA4GE as much as possible and ensure people had an ability to create a professional network. So in our 3 hours, what we did is in the first 20 minutes, we gave quick presentations about what PHA4GE is, what our working group is, similar to the discussion you and I had in the previous episode. And then we broke all the groups up into 5 or 6 students. And this is a framework I feel like we got to keep applying because it was wildly effective. And then once we had the participants broken up into 5 or 6 participants, we just gave them prompts, question prompts and discussion, almost like hackathon style. And the first question that we put out there was, where do you see the field of public health bioinformatics progressing over the next 5 years? And then we, had something to say, hey, think both field-wide, institutionally, the ones in terms of the institution you represent, and then also personally. And then from that, we gave them about 15 or 20 minutes to discuss, like, where do you see the field going? And it was amazing seeing where the conversations were going, from people talking about, direct diagnostics, real-time surveillance for all the major pathogens, metagenomics. Some of the people talking about themselves want to be seasoned software developers. Some people talking about in 5 years, I want to be a laboratory director. I want to direct this because I see the impact. So you could see everyone's minds going all these different directions. And then seeing them bounce these ideas off one another and talking about their experiences and all the like, to just encourage that conversation. So that broke the ice immediately. And then in the next 20 minutes, we asked the question, what are the challenges that would inhibit the goals that you've set yourself out for in these 5 years? And then they were talking about all the things that we kind of bring us back down to earth, and what are the challenges we've been talking about for the past couple of years in terms of, is there funding that will allow me to do this in our field? Are there standards that allow us for the real-time international kind of surveillance initiatives? Is there training and education? Are there technical communities that allow me to do these types of things? And then they started parling out what are the critical challenges. And then the last question we asked to kind of wrap the session was, now propose projects or initiatives that PHA4GE can take on to address these challenges. And then they started going right back at it. Now it ended on another positive note. Okay, they were talking about, hey, if we don't have trainings, PHA4GE could put these trainings on. These are the people who would be able to disseminate this kind of information. If we don't have funding, PHA4GE can help us craft the narratives to our governments and our politicians to ensure that this is realized in terms of the value it brings to our communities. And from that just stemmed all these different projects that even as a working group, we can take on. How do we standardize the field? How do we ensure the educational access? How do we ensure that the funding decisions are all discussed? And that was my first day. That was my first day in Cape Town.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
a lot for a first day. Jeez, fair play to you.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
wondering, since being held in Africa, was there much involvement from the Africa CDC or anyone from that end of the country or continent?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So in the pre-conference was mainly students. There was some also, seasoned practitioners like Torsten was involved in our working group exercise as an example. But then the actual conference started Monday of this week, and there was a ton of representation from Africa CDC. We had the US CDC Office of Advanced Molecular Detection also represented at this conference. So Duncan McCannell, the director of that program there. We also had some representation from WHO and their new International Pathogen Surveillance Network that was highlighted in their initiatives and goals, and also how that aligns to the PHA4GE consortium. So yeah, that representation was or rather those organizations and those perspectives were well represented in this conference. There was an incredible talk from Gerald Mboa, who's been the Pathogen Genomics Initiative bioinformatics scientist, setting up sequencing and bioinformatics capabilities across the continent. He had this crazy slide that I think I've seen at least once before. Maybe he gave it at the Grand Challenges of in 2019, across all the 53, I believe, member states of Africa CDC, I believe there was 9 laboratories who had sequencing capabilities in 2019. Through PGI, it's something like 47. Now, like 47 laboratories now have it. So like in this wildly short amount of time, sequencing capabilities were distributed across the continent. The exact plus or minus 5 on that. So we'll put an asterisk there for the exact figures, but just amazing initiatives that were highlighted in terms of gaining and supporting and bolstering the sequencing efforts across the continent. And that was, something that was, again, highlighted and presented on during this conference.
I guess just having sequencers isn't enough. You do need all of the upskilling and the people. That the people is a hard bit, and that's I think where PHA4GE probably comes in.
Exactly that, and that's right on top of Gerald Mboa and PGI and Africa CDC. Exactly where their mindset is at. Now that all these laboratories have these capabilities of generating these large volumes of data, how now do they have access to the right resources to analyze these data? And that comes. That's a very heavy question, very deep question, because it's not just the technical capabilities. There's a conversation of the infrastructure in terms of compute infrastructure, but even local infrastructure. So there's a lot of conversation of even internet access and being able to make sure that there's even the right logistical infrastructure to ensure that sample collection can take place. So that, if you have a NovaSeq on your campus, are you getting enough samples from around the country to, warrant a NovaSeq run? So that was top of mind. Data sharing, something that you and I got a lot of exposure to in terms of that conversation at GMI. That was also top of mind and discussed about throughout the conference. And that's, I think, exactly where PHA4GE can play a really powerful role in helping to address these major challenges in the field.
Yeah, awesome. So, day one of the conference, what was the kind of key takeaways you have from the conference?
All right, and I've got to say this too, because you talk about day one in terms of the first impressions. I'll talk about first impressions and maybe final thoughts of things. First impressions is that this part of the world is insanely beautiful. I don't know if you spent some time in Cape Town, but it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. The city's on the coast. So as soon as you get into Cape Town, you see the ocean, but then you also see Table Mountain, and then also this sort of urban dense city. So it's city, it's sea, it's mountains. And then that's where we spent the pre-conference. And then we were, I think maybe an hour or so south, maybe 45 minutes south to the Somerset West area. And this is close to the Vineyard area. And this is where they hosted the conference. So you got to see full display, the beauty of this country And they really did high level. I think anybody who attended this conference will fully agree. This was the most beautiful conference most of us have ever attended. I can say that was certainly the most beautiful conference. Yeah, so I think they did that well, and I could see how that was maybe a difficult decision in some respects, but I think it highlighted, a little bit of the life that we all have too, and the appreciation we have for the work we're doing. But in terms of that first day, I think I'm looking a bit about the talks that were given in terms of the agenda. First day is that there's a lot of focus on ensuring that there's quality assurance standards that are being established and agreed upon for genomic surveillance. This is definitely difficult and will take subject matter expertise from the various pathogens of interest to ensure that we are establishing appropriate quality control metrics. There's been some start in this, of course, with maybe domestic efforts I'm aware of in the US with PulseNet and PulseNet International with enteric pathogens. The same with SARS-CoV-2. Of course, we've seen those QC thresholds thrown about, but a lot of these other organisms defining the quality control parameters are still in the mix. But there's a lot of eyes on this exact problem and how to ensure that there's quality data is being shared and distributed to inform public health action.
And because at the moment,
go on.
So I was going to say, at the moment, each individual lab in each individual country, reinvents the wheel and sets these thresholds themselves and goes through the same exercises, coming up with different answers each time, which is a bit crazy. Really, we do need to pull together and have this one thing you can copy and paste, and there you go. It's an agreed thing by experts in the field.
And it doesn't need to be static. Like, it could at least be a rung in the ladder of like, hey, this is where we're saying we are right now, and these are the proposed quality control metrics that we can agree upon. If it needs to iterate and change, we can do so. And I think that's been the sort of perspective of PHA4GE. So that was amazing to see. We almost opened up in one of our first sessions on that. Following that, I got to moderate a session on computational tools for pathogen genomics, and that was we saw Jen Guthrie from Western Ontario speak on some of the bioinformatics tools that she's generating for non-tuberculous mycobacterium, and the oddities of that bug and lack of awareness of exactly how to characterize and genotype those resources. We saw talks from CZI. I think it was Katrina. I forget her last name. It starts with a K. Katrina K. From CZI talking about CZID, and then Eileen Mizrachi from NCBI talking about the data platform. So there was a focus on what are the resources out there available for people to actually start analyzing these data. How are people approaching the bioinformatics development, focusing on what to prioritize. I think Jen did a great job of that, of we all have a hammer in terms of sequencing, but not everything's a nail. So whenever you start deciding what to sequence, you have to consider, what is the value to the public health community? What is known? What is exploratory curiosity versus pragmatic public health action? I think she did a great job in articulating that. And then, so that was the first day, I believe, was just focused on quality assurance and computational tools. And I think the takeaway was that there's a lot of amazing things happening. And these kinds of consortiums, these kinds of groups are so necessary for us to be all aware. So we're not walking in different directions. It was almost like this was like the huddle up before the next play. The American football analogy, I don't know exactly in cricket or rugby. Oh, something I didn't say. I got to see the Rugby World Cup, of which South Africa won. Yeah, they defeated the South Africans would not forgive me if I didn't mention that in this podcast, that South Africa took the World Cup 4th in a row over their rivals in New Zealand. But back to the conference. Yeah, that was the takeaway, that amazing things are happening. A lot of effort and focus is being put towards our field. And we need to make sure that we continue speaking to one another to harmonize on the efforts that we're all engaging in.
Awesome. Well, is there any final takeaways then from this conference?
I'm always focused on the bioinformatics development, of course, and that's where my world comes from. So at least from my perspective, even coming away from GMI, I think I gained a deeper appreciation of all these other challenges with respect to data sharing and data access and the ethics behind that. That was a huge thing spoken about during this conference of, how do you ensure, the conference of data governance, data sovereignty, and all those sort of major topics when talking about international data sharing. So that was a major topic. And then the infrastructure, the solutions for infrastructure were also highlighted well. So Joel from Pathogen gave a great talk in the way in which that the Terra platform has helped to solve this for a lot of different laboratories, and how that's a ready available solution for a lot of public health labs looking to this, and emphasizing how that's a beautiful model that could be adopted in terms of, graphic user interface, cloud infrastructure, containerized workflows, and all the like. And then in general, it's just the major takeaways. Something they did well here today. It was a conference of given the backdrop of just the gratitude and appreciation for this global network of practitioners coming together, trying to solve what we have identified as the most critical challenges of our communities. So I'm leaving feeling optimistic, feeling motivated, feeling encouraged by the community, by the field. And yeah, I thank everybody who's been involved in this, the Gates Foundation for funding this, and for Alan Christoffels and his vision for where he wants to take this moving forward.
Awesome. Well, I hope to be able to get to the second PHA conference next year. And yeah, I can't wait. It's great hearing about it, and we'll see you next time.